Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
What is up, guys? Welcome to First Cut. I'm Andres. I'm here with RB3 and Sabrina. This is our review of I'm Thinking of Ending Things, the new Charlie Kaufman movie that is currently on Netflix. This is the movie that a lot of people were anticipating, especially you guys, because you guys put this on your most anticipated list for 2020. We finally got a chance to see the movie. The first thing I want to do, guys, obviously we want to analyze the film and try to talk about what essentially this movie's trying to say. But the first thing I want to do is get your general thoughts on the movie itself, because at the end of the day, guys, it's still a movie, so we should still review it as a movie. So I want to get your general thoughts as a film. What did you think of this film, Sabrina?
Yeah, my general thoughts on the film, it's something that I really enjoy. I like a lot of Kaufman's work, especially because, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is one of my favorite films of all time, and he wrote that, so it's really interesting to see him writing his own screenplay and then directing it as well, and seeing his talents then really shine, and we see a lot of that. One of my favorite moments from Eternal Sunshine is when they're inside the home and it's raining inside the apartment, and we also get a glimpse of that within this film. We have it's snowing on the inside, so I loved that kind of little nod. I don't know if he was referencing Eternal Sunshine. I don't know if this is just something he envisioned in his head, but regardless, that was something I really enjoyed. This film, like you said, was one of our most anticipated, and we talked about it at the end of last year, and I would have loved to see this in a theater because I would have loved to have that audience reaction, because it is definitely very mind-bending, very trippy, very full of multitudes. That's what to expect from Kaufman's work. Watching it at home was still a really great experience. This is it's definitely one of those very existential dread type of films, and that's what a lot of us are feeling right now, and in a weird masochistic way, I love to experience all of that. That I feel with A24's A Ghost Story, which I know you love, Andres. This is in a similar vein for me, where afterwards I don't necessarily feel good. I feel very, very full of thoughts, and my mind is running at 1,000 miles an hour. But I really enjoyed this, and I think it's going to get even better on multiple rewatches. It's just one of those. But the writing, the performances were absolutely incredible, from Jessie Plemons, Toni Collette. We have Jessie Buckley. There's a lot of great work within this film. I mean, it's weird, but it really worked out for me in the end.
RB3, your thoughts on the film itself. I'm definitely curious about your thoughts.
I've been a huge Charlie Kaufman fan for a long, long time. Like Sabrina said, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is one of the classic movies to come out in recent history. On top of that, being John Malkovich is probably one of my most personal inspirational films I've ever seen, and that was one of his first works. And then adaptation as well, which I watched I believe I was 15 or 16 in high school, and it just literally blew my mind. I didn't know a movie can communicate and communicate the kind of things that it was communicating in terms of self-awareness, and literally having a movie be about a screenwriter writing a screenplay for the movie you're watching right now. I thought it was so incredible. So I've always been a big fan of his work. In terms of his work as a director, Cine Dosh New York, Cine Dosh New York, I think that's how you pronounce it, is the one he did before this, starring Philip Seymour Hoffman, and that is literally another one of my, I wouldn't say one of my favorites, but definitely one of the most challenging films I've ever read, and definitely set me down a rabbit hole of film analysis and film, looking at film and deep reading film in a certain type of way that I never had before watching that movie. So, and literally because of that movie, I got introduced to so many YouTube channels Your Movie Suck, or other video essay channels that were covering Cine Dosh New York. And so I just, as somebody who loves and enjoys challenging cinema, I'm just a huge fan of this dude's work. I was a little bit disappointed by his last feature, which was the animated film, I'm Elisa, because I just I'm Elisa, because for me personally, it just didn't feel, even though they were animated, stop motion figures, I kind of like the human aspects of Charlie Kaufman's work a lot, so it kind of was lacking that a little bit. But for this, it really got it back, and like Sabrina said, it was really like this kind of like a stereo kind of mind-bending trip that we've come to expect from him. I think in previous films and his previous work, a lot of it's been a lot more about like, you know, creative or like creative processes and stuff like that. This one kind of like takes a divergence from that with like the whole road trip angle, which I thought was interesting. But I think it just continues the brilliant streak of Charlie Kaufman's filmography, where you're just like taking a really deep, really personal and up close look into the mind of somebody, inside the mind of one of his characters. And yeah, I just thought it was brilliant. Even though I'm still having questions as to like exactly what all was happening, like when, and you know, all that kind of stuff. But I love challenging cinema, and this was definitely another one of those. So I really appreciated it.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because the movie gives you hints as far as what it's trying to nail and what exactly you're watching, essentially with the quantum physics angle of the whole concept of time, and time not necessarily being something that as straightforward as going from point A to point B, yet time being something that's kind of all around you, and time passing through you, right? We see that throughout the entire movie, especially towards the beginning of the film when we get to meet the family and we see them age up, age down. We see the childhood bedroom of Jake. We see certain things and certain aspects of his personality come back to him being more of a child than him being more of an adult. We see the aging process take place because that's another aspect of the film, is the idea of aging and what that takes away and what that represents inside humanity. There's even an entire aspect of adaptation, RB3, because you mentioned that, and it's interesting because there is a lot of artist angle towards this, especially towards poetry, towards painting, towards pretty much any kind of art he
Towards
touches
film.
on, and even movies in this.
Yeah.
Towards film. Like pretty much every art aspect is touched upon in this movie when it comes to commentary, which is kind of interesting, right? Because we see her find that book that pretty much has her exact same poem. We see her find the paintings that are exactly the same paintings that she has in the basement. So these are all aspects attempting to show you that humanity is kind of repeating the same process over and over again, even when it comes to art. But it's so interesting that you guys are actually like super on board with everything. I think that's so fascinating. The thing I find different, Sabrina, from this movie towards something like A Ghost Story, and obviously it's the big giant difference in anything, is the dialogue and the script, right? Because this is a heavy dialogue when it comes to communication between one person and another person, and when it comes to obviously the VO thoughts of our main character. They're very poetic, they're very critical analysis, they're very existential, a lot of dialogue that's very repetitive. I'm very curious what you guys think of the dialogue, because to me that's kind of a make or break, because at one point I was like, this might be much as far as the kind of idea that he keeps throwing at the audience. I'm like, I think I get it in the first hour of the movie, but then we have another hour and 20 minutes to get through when it comes to that similar type of dialogue. What did you think of the dialogue, Sabrina?
I actually thought it was really beautiful. I thought it was really poetic, and at times something like this seemed pretentious when you don't think the person is intelligent enough to be thinking this type of stuff. But I did believe it from this character, because they even talk about abstract art in the film and kind of what the difference is between like abstract art and like realism and things like that. And this is abstract art in filmmaking as a whole. So everything is kind of dialed up a little bit differently. Obviously, everything that we see on screen is abstract. Even the dialogue, like normal people, when we have thoughts to ourselves, like we don't think this intelligently at all times, the way we have our character played by Jessie Buckley thinking. But it really does work for me. I love that like stream of consciousness thoughts that are elevated for sure, and it helps us along with the story. It helps us along with her thought process and what she's thinking. And I love the phrase of like, I'm thinking of ending things, because in the trailer and even within the film, you could take it as like the relationship, but she doesn't necessarily fully actually say like, I'm thinking of ending the relationship. She kind of says it, but she also all of her thoughts are pretty like depressing. They're pretty sad. And it could also mean just like life in general, because she is thinking all these existential, very out there. And I admired a lot of the dialogue. I don't know how much of it came straight from the novel and or how much of it we see in that, but regardless, like I really enjoyed it, and I thought as like a viewer, it's very, very heavy for sure, but it definitely worked for me in the sense of like the characterization, who the character is, and the fact that this is something more out there, abstract like art.
Yeah, what did you think of the way certain themes were communicated, RB3, in the dialogue? Because it definitely is very dense, for sure. I think that's the best word to describe it.
The movie's interesting in the fact that like the dialogue is very dense, but like it does as much as it can to tell the story without a lot of the dialogue elements. Like it does a lot of visual storytelling. I think and I think the pacing is part of why it feels different and weird and ethereal too. Because like for example, like the whole notion of spending the first 30 minutes of this movie inside of the car on the way to this house that they're going to or whatever, it kind of creates this sense of entrapment, like the sense of inescapability that can play to the metaphor of the relationship or can play to the overall metaphor of life and mortality that Sabrina was speaking on. So it all wraps in together, definitely.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is the idea of words, phrasing, pacing, tone. These are all things that Charlie Kaufman manipulates in this movie or plays around with in this movie. There's scenes around the kitchen table where Toni Collette's character starts stuttering a lot, and then we see Jessie Buckley's character start stuttering a lot. And then we see them repeat certain words kind of over and over again to emphasize it, and then they pick up at the same word. It's almost kind of like rhythmic and poetic in the sense of, I believe there's a line where Toni Collette's character says something like, "Yeah, and that's why I said sorry," and she goes, "Sorry, sorry, yeah," and then they do that. So it's a play on words. There's another one where she ends a sentence with power. And then Jessie Buckley's character picks up that word and she goes, "Power, power is the," and then it's a continuation kind of thing where they're picking up each other's rhythm, each other's words, and I feel like that entire scene kind of made my brain hurt a little bit because it's the idea of like your brain waves are attacking each other's brain waves. If someone is thinking slow, you start to think slow. If someone is thinking very quick and is very quick-witted, that you start to pick up and being quick-witted. That's what I started to notice between the characters. So it's definitely Charlie Kaufman having a lot of fun with that and talking about the influence of language as well.
Well, I think that's intentional, and I think he does. I think that there's often a thing in screenwriting where you have to like be careful not to write every character in like one particular voice, like not write every character in like the voice of like the writer. I think Charlie Kaufman is actually doing that intentionally for the fact of letting you know that this all takes place inside of one person's head. Now, whose head does this take place inside of? Is it the janitor? Is it the young woman? Is it is it Jack? You're not really sure. And I think that's where the movie becomes fascinating. I think that's where the non-dialogue elements start to come into communication. Those quick little cuts and hidden moments and edits that they just kind of fly by, tell you the most about, give you the most kind of cues and clues about what the movie was really happening in the movie. So,
what do you think, Sabrina? What do you think the POV is in this movie? Do you think it's Buckley's character?
That definitely is really tough because that's the way I watched it the first time. But after finishing the ending, I think it would take a second rewatch to be definitive. But that's the way I looked at it the first time. But you can tell, honestly, by the end, I don't think so. I don't think it's through her perspective. Even though she is really what's communicating, like RB3 said, that like kind of like entrapped type of like loneliness, like that isolation. Like they're literally like isolated in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the snow. It's dark multiple times. And even though he's there, he's like interrupting her. He's going back and forth. She's thinking and he's like, "What are you thinking?" Or like, "Did you say something?" And while she's going through all those like monologue heavy thoughts that she has. And so that's the way I first watched it. But after finishing it, I don't know. I think it might be through like the janitor, honestly, or Jake, or that Jake and that they're all kind of the same person. It's very
I
very
think they're the
weird.
same
I think
person
that
as
they're
well.
all one person. Yeah.
Yeah,
So the way
that's what I took away.
yeah, so I just think it's all one person. And a little bit of that from the trailers. I didn't read anything up on the novel or anything leading up to this. It was something that I typically do, but for a story like this, I know that there was going to be some like hidden messages and hidden meanings, so I wanted to be able to experience it with like fresh eyes. But yeah, what I came out of it is that they're all one, and so it's through all of their perspectives.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because we get hints of Jake and I forget her name in the movie. Jessie Buckley's character, Cindy, in the movie.
No, she doesn't
Cindy.
have a name. It's
Well, she
like
doesn't have a
Lucy
name.
Louise.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she
Oh.
doesn't have a name.
It just says Cindy here. My bad. They give us hints that they're the same character, considering that she finds the poetry book in his room, she finds the art paintings in his basement, and he's an artist and she's an artist. They could be kind of two sides of the same coin, where they are two perspectives on their childhood, and then visiting their parents, her parents or his parents, is kind of that reflection on how she grew up and where she grew up and her perspective on where she wants to go in the future. And that's why she's always wanting to leave, continually saying, I have to go, I have to go. And then Jake's character really emphasizing wanting to stay and take care of his parents, kind of shows the two sides of himself, of wanting to decide what to do with your own life. And it's that idea of like nature and nurture as well that comes up. That's why I think they're the same person. I mean, I might be wrong. I don't know what you think, RB3, as far as who the POV character is.
Well, that's what's fascinating because there's multiple ways to look at it. I personally do see her as the POV character, because like I think we do get windows inside of her perspective a little more than I think any other character. Like there's scenes where she's by herself, and other characters aren't in the room first. So usually to me that's just like a filmmaking clue of like it's that person's perspective, but that might not be true. I think what's happening for my interpretation of the entire movie, I think this is all. I think she kind of has mythologized this like boyfriend character, Jack kind of character in her mind. And this is, and like you said, there are clues that indicates her and Jack are the same person, because not only that, there's literally a moment where she's looking at the photo in Jack's house and she's like, whose picture is that? And he's like, oh, that's a picture of me. You sure that's not a picture of me? So it's like, like there's moments where, of course, they're overlapping. I think what she is seeing when she goes to Jake's house is really her own family home, and her inability to cope with that, to cope with those the emotions and the feelings of societal anxiety that her parents have put onto her. And so I think, and really when you look at it, it's really, well, see, but that's what makes a good counter argument for either side, because on the flip side though, there's really her and the parents are kind of speaking the same for the most part, but then Jack is kind of the one who steps out of it. So there's an argument that Jack's the POV character, but you can also look at it like, is her parents, so she's more familiar with him. So it's really kind of tough to tell. But for me personally, I think the whole movie is about running from fears, running from memories, running from identity. The whole idea of like, I'm thinking of ending things like being like more of what Sabrina alluded to, like a suicidal metaphor, and like her looking back on memories of her life. And that's why we see parents having differing age sets, and that's why we see different gaps of time, because when you look at memories don't necessarily remember memories chronologically, and sometimes you don't even remember memories accurately. You remember memories based on what they represent. And I think the parents being from different ages at different points in the movie represent like how what they represented, regardless of what they represented during a particular time in this person's life, even though it's only within the confines of like one dinner. So I don't know. There's so much to like dig into, but I personally see it as her movie, and that Jack, and maybe Jack and the janitor and her are all the same person. But I think that if that's the case, I think she would be the main vessel of the story, and then Jack would be the imaginary version. But I think there's also a way you can interpret it that Jack's the vessel, and then that she's the imaginary person. I think there's a very solid argument for that too. So,
going off of what you said, it's one of those things that, you know, when you're watching something for the first time, you're looking at it with fresh eyes and you don't understand. But something I picked up on that I'm definitely curious to really dive into on a rewatch. But when they do go to the parents' house, it's interesting to either think that they're all the same person and they represent different facets of one person, like each the janitor, the woman, and then also Jake. They could represent like different ideas of one human, but when they go to visit the family right away, we know it takes a long time for the parents to come down, which is like really interesting, and that's like an interesting idea. But once they do, they're not really paying attention at all. Like it's almost like, and they're paying attention to the woman, the unnamed woman, because her name changes throughout multiple times in this film. And that's he's the only person with like a consistent name throughout the entire film. Like he even calls her like Amy at one point, like Ames.
Ames, yeah.
Yeah, Ames, and then we have like Lucy and like a few different ones, and
Lucia,
it's just interesting.
Yeah.
Lucille, yeah, like a few different things like that, and then the parents rarely actually pay attention to Jake, even though he's the only distinct character that we actually really know, like like backstory, and even like occupations change throughout this entire film, and it is really subtle. It does start subtle with the parents having different ages. It first starts off as a subtle thing, then it gets more blatant. And it is really interesting to look back on that, because thinking of when you go into your own mind and you have a nostalgic look at certain of your life, sometimes you don't remember exactly what someone looked like. You might remember that they're there. If I think about my 12th birthday, I don't know what my mom looked like, but I'm going to create an idea of what I thought she looked like in my head. And so that kind of plays around with it when it's the more subtle angles of that one. And I think once it gets to the end, I do think that this is a reflection on multiple facets of the same person throughout their life. I do think that this entire thing was that reflection mixed in with the memories, mixed in with the nostalgia. We even have, like, you know, the young girls like laughing at the janitor, and then having Jake be shy going up to them at like the ice cream shop. It's the same two girls. It's the same two actresses. So like it's interesting to think about that, because like maybe like back in the day there was an ice cream shop and the girls weren't as nice to him, and now as the older janitor he pictures them as the same two girls who are mean to him at like his job and kind of like laugh at him and make fun of him. So it really, like, I mean, this is a lot to take in. This is very dense, not even just with dialogue, but with the visuals, because even with how much dialogue there is, it does so much visual storytelling that things might be happening for just a second. And when little things like, too, when she opens up the washer and there's just a bunch of the janitor uniforms. So it all is tying in, and it's something really interesting to look at. But yeah, the way I see it is, yeah, this is the end of his life. He's ending things, and he's going back and kind of having all the different elements of himself, looking at his life nostalgically in all different ways. For the woman, the parents are a little bit warmer to her than they actually act towards Jake, especially on the initial meeting. It's something really interesting. So there could have been moments or elements of the life that during Jake's life, that they were warmer to certain ideas of his and then less warm to others, and that's the absentee part, is what Jake's really feeling. But then this facet of him, they're a little bit kinder and warmer too. It's something really interesting because, yeah, on that initial meeting, they barely pay attention to Jake at all. There really is a lot to go through within this one, and so much visual storytelling. Something that I thought was really interesting is like the choreography at the end, that whole dance sequence, going through a life that, it's interesting if this is an argument for if they're not the same person, and if this woman is actually just somebody who he had like a past relationship with, and then the choreography is going through life, and they even have him like bleeding at one point, and our janitor has that same like scar on his chest. So it's like it all is like melding together. But yeah, I think they're the same person, but I can 100% see the argument for that she is like a figment of his imagination. So the first time I watched it, I thought it was from her perspective, but now I think that it's really Jake who is imagining it all, even though we get more moments with her. It's really interesting.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of exploration there when it comes to the idea of the mind, of aging, of time, and how that's all intersected and connected, considering that our mind is kind of the first thing. Well, I mean, our body is the first thing to go, but then our mind is included in that when it comes to dementia, when it comes to Alzheimer's. We even get that little reference to it when it comes to his father, that he mentions that. And the idea that our memories are kind of in place, and that the first thing, even in the beginning of the movie, when she talks about a thought is the first thing that we kind of have is a thought, and that's kind of the most powerful and the most bizarre thing that a human can have. So it's all kind of in play when it comes to the idea of imagination, poetry, artistry, and time, and quantum physics, I guess, considering that's a portion of her study. We get that final scene when it comes to the performance, where we almost see this coming of this is complete what he wanted, right? This performance. It's the idea of, in the beginning of the movie, when he mentions the idea of a musical, and how much he loves musicals, and a performance, because we get that dance sequence, and how the janitor actually says that if your boyfriend is here, they're going to be safe. The creating that safety in this high school, and especially the high school performance of this musical, is kind of the ideal situation of his life, almost like an afterlife type scenario, where he's at peace and he's safe. I don't know what you guys took away from that final sequence, the dance and the musical performance. Sabrina.
To me at first, for a second, I thought the school was going to represent some kind of like purgatory, possibly, and maybe still in that way. And so that's kind of what I thought. But then also, it's really, because we have like the janitor coming to terms with all those moments in his life, from the dance sequence to actually acknowledging the woman and having a conversation with her that's very emotional for the both of them, and they don't know each other, but they're hugging, and her being confused. So it's almost like, I do think that it's really just like this purgatory where they're all coming to terms with everything as he's, like ending things. And these are all the elements of his life that are now going to be like gone soon. So it's just coming to terms with his like upbringing and everything of that sort. That's kind of what I got from it.
Yeah. What did you think of the ending of this movie, RB3?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I thought, it was ambiguous. It's funny because I didn't like the ending of Euphoria, right? Like, I didn't like that movie ended on a dance sequence, because I thought, wow, the show is so powerful and dynamic that, wow, you're just going to end on a dance scene? Come on. But even though it represented something very deep and very touching, like relapse and drug addiction, all that kind of stuff, this movie, though, it kind of seemed kind of fitting for it to end this way, because I feel like it's all about expression. It's the whole central theme throughout this entire movie is expression and the lack thereof. Like how hard it is for, either Jake or the young woman or the janitor or whoever is the character of the POV, how hard it is for them to express themselves to other people and to, frankly, themselves. So I feel like dance is the most expressive form of communication, and I think that's why that you kind of have to end on something like that. You're right, Sabrina. I did think that the high school was going to be some sort of like purgatory or some sort of in-between or some sort of different universe or something like that. Or maybe I thought maybe they're entering inside of his head when they enter inside the high school. Maybe the janitor is really, maybe the janitor is really the full POV character, and the high school is all inside of his mind. Or maybe all of this is inside of his mind. What I did find fascinating is how a janitor could watch a full movie in a cafeteria during that one scene. I don't know if y'all remember that scene. I thought that was kind of weird that he must have just brought in his own projector or whatever. But I think look, I feel like ultimately there's never going to be a right answer or wrong answer to what exactly this movie is supposed to say or what it's supposed to mean. And I think the ending is just another indicator of, like, yeah, you're not supposed to get it, but let's, you know, hopefully the movie can have some sort of conclusion that it could go to. And it's funny because this thing was marketed as like a horror film or a thriller film. I really didn't feel horrified or like thrilled or anything like throughout this movie, and that's not a negative, but I did feel disturbed. So I definitely get that sense of disturb and unrest in watching this movie. I wouldn't classify it as a horror movie. I think that's a little mischaracterization, but I think the ending was indicative of all the themes that came before it. So
I would argue that I don't think it's like a straightforward like horror film, but I do think it's a very psychological horror film because, as I said, I didn't end this movie feeling like the best, and even during the movie, I definitely was pretty disturbed. I was pretty like shaken by a few things, even though nothing is visually terrifying. We don't get any of that, but I do think it's so psychologically like going into your mind and that like deep dive into like existential dread that it can be dark. Like I think it's like it can be definitely like a very dark thing, and it also is really interesting because there are so many ways to look at film and to look at the ending. And I think this one was definitely a lot drearier of a one than something like An Eternal Sunshine or even Adaptation or anything like that. One sec. Oh my god. One sec, guys. Sorry. What the fuck?
there you go.
Someone's FaceTiming me. And it popped up on my screen. Where's my Zoom? It like took the screen over and oh my god.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's all good. I don't even know who that number is. Okay.
It's me. No, I'm kidding. It's not me.
No, I'm like so confused. I just connected FaceTime to my laptop and it's been the worst decision I've ever made because every single time somebody FaceTimes me, whatever I'm on my laptop goes away and then the FaceTime thing comes up. Anyway, so I'm going to try to continue. I don't know how you're going to piece this together, RB3,
I got you.
RB3 is
so I'm sorry. But yeah, what I'm gonna say, it's definitely probably one of the least accessible films out of like his filmography, and it's already pretty like inaccessible just in terms of like really having like a broad general audience who's gonna come out of this feeling good and feeling something like more than intrigued. I think that this is something a lot darker than what we genuinely, or maybe, and that could be my subjective feelings, but this one actually I felt pretty bad after finishing it. I can't wait to watch it again. That's the masochist in me, but I did not feel any sense of like relief at all. Even the ending wasn't even like for would be, but for me I just felt more of the existential dread and I never got that moment of relief, but I still really enjoyed it. That's not like a knock to the movie.
Yeah, I think that's my thing, and I guess this is how we'll finish up. Is I'm curious about these kind of movies because I really want to see obviously different types of movies and not always the same. And this is obviously slightly more experimental than a usual mainstream movie. However, I do feel like at times, as great as Kaufman is at dialogue, the dialogue becomes slightly repetitive when it comes to the purpose of telling you what this movie is, considering it is about time, it is about aging, it is about life, and point A to point B when it comes to the beginning of life and the end of life. It is about memory, it is about thoughts. However, by the time we reach the end, I feel like I've gotten the same conclusion that I might have gotten halfway through the movie. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's a very long-winded movie when it comes to the purpose of what Kaufman was trying to say. I got what he was trying to say like halfway through the movie, and then we just keep going. So I think that's my only issue with the film is that it went a little long for me. But other than that, I'm super curious how people are going to react to this movie when it comes to a general Netflix audience and when it comes to critics themselves. I'm super curious. But either way, guys, those are our thoughts on the new Charlie Kaufman movie. I'm thinking of ending things. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Is this an incredible movie? Is this one of your favorites? Any and all thoughts, you guys can leave us down in the comments down below. Yeah, for the Meaning of Podcast, I'm here with RB3. RB3, where can the good people find you?
Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3.
Sabrina?
Twitter and Instagram at Sabrina X Monica, and then also Twitter at Sabrina on Film.
And obviously, guys, I'm at Squad Leader Race. You can follow us here at First Cut. Make sure to subscribe, and at First Cut TMO on social media. Alrighty, guys, for the First Cut crew, I'm Andres.
This is RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
And we're peacing out. Peace out, guys.
Maybe this is how it was always going to end.